Welcome back. Today we're digging into a commentary piece that analyzes Brett Cooper's reaction to that viral video of Nick Fuentes and Sneeko partying down in Miami.
Right. So it's a direct response, basically critiquing her for what the author sees as defending extremism.
It's a heavy topic. You've got internet culture, politics, hate speech.
There's a lot to unpack. And it really gets into this question of how you can effectively argue against something without, losing the moral high ground.
Exactly. So let's jump right in. The first thing that really stands out is this friction, this tension between the really serious subject matter and the specific words chosen to critique it.
That's the first thing I noticed, too. I mean, the author is tackling, one of the most serious topics out there right now, the rise of overt anti-Semitism.
And how it's disguised as free speech.
Yeah, but the script keeps reaching for these insults that feel, almost juvenile for what's at stake.
You think so? I mean, calling someone a dingbat or a dweeb, isn't that just standard YouTube language? Are we maybe being a little too highbrow for the space?
That's a fair point. But I think it's about the status game. The weakness isn't just that the words are silly, it's the huge tonal mismatch it creates. It actually lowers the author's status.
How so?
Well, you've got this section where the narrator is rightly pointing out the danger of, Jew haters and this woke Reich, which frames this as a huge cultural battle.
Okay.
But then, in almost the same breath, they're called dingbats.
Ah, I see what you mean. It's like wearing a clown nose to a serious meeting.
Exactly. It takes the narrator from being a serious cultural critic to just another person shouting insults online. It feels reactive, not analytical.
Right. If you call a Nazi a dweeb, you're almost making the evil seem smaller, less threatening.
You're bullying a nerd, not fighting evil. And that's dangerous, when the whole point of the script is to say, hey, these guys are actually dangerous.
Okay, that's a really sharp distinction. So the goal is to show these guys are ridiculous, but the way it's done right now just feels petty.
So the suggestion is pretty straightforward. We need to shift away from these ad hominem attacks and toward ideological critiques. The vocabulary just needs to be elevated to match the threat level.
Okay, I like that. It doesn't mean you have to be less aggressive, just more precise with the aggression. But give me a concrete example. How do you replace a classic like dingbat without sounding like a college paper?
It's all about precision. So instead of dingbats, which sounds like something from a 90s sitcom, you could use more descriptive words.
Like what?
Provocateurs, ethno-nationalists, or ideological extremists. These words have weight. They define what the person is doing, not just call them a name. It signals to your audience, I'm taking this seriously and you should too.
That makes a lot of sense. And it probably applies to the physical insults too. The script spends a fair bit of time mocking Nick Fuentes for looking like a virgin or for being short.
Yeah, the little dweeb stuff.
And playing devil's advocate again. That kind of stuff gets views. It gets a laugh. So why cut it?
It does get a laugh, but you have to ask at what cost. Aren't you just validating the very worldview you're trying to criticize?
What do you mean?
Well, their whole thing is about being alpha males, right? So by mocking their masculinity, their height, their sexual history, you're basically playing their game. You're fighting on their turf.
So you're validating the idea that physical dominance is what actually matters.
Exactly. So the suggestion here is to pivot the critique, move it from the physical to the
performative.
We're not making fun of how they look. We're making fun of the image they're trying to project.
Okay, so less about his height, more about the hypocrisy of the situation.
Yes, that's the goldmine. You have these guys who call themselves traditional values advocates, preaching about Western culture.
And they're dressing up like drug lords from Scarface.
Exactly. They're cosplaying as criminals. The weakness isn't that they're short. The weakness is that they're hypocrites. They aren't traditionalists. They're just LARPing.
That's a much, much stronger angle. It shifts the argument from you look silly to your entire philosophy is incoherent.
And that forces the listener to think instead of just laughing at a cheap shot. It changes the fight from narrator versus Nick to logic versus absurdity.
Okay, let's move on to the structure of the argument itself. The script is trying to counter Brett Cooper's main defense, which is her use of the Streisand effect.
Versus criticism as fuel.
But the way the rebuttal is laid out right now, it's kind of looping. It mixes the descriptions of the Miami party with the actual counter-argument. I felt myself getting a little lost.
It's messy. For the listener, you get a bit of this abstract, logical argument about the Streisand effect. Then boom, you're in a club in Miami.
And then there's a mention of a Kanye song, then back to the argument, then back to the outfits. It's hard to follow the actual disagreement.
So the weakness is that the counter-argument gets totally diluted by the play-by-play. It loses all its punch.
It keeps stopping to admire the scenery.
Precisely. So the suggestion is to isolate Brett's argument and dedicate a whole section to refuting it. We need to block out the script. Block A is here's what happened in the club. Block B is here's why Brett's take on it is wrong.
I can see that. It would definitely help the listener. Now, you mentioned a steel man approach. Can you break down what that would look like here?
Sure. A steel man is the opposite of a straw man. So instead of attacking a weak version of your opponent's argument, you present their argument in its absolute strongest form first. You show that you understand it.
So you'd start by saying
something like, Brett argues that outrage marketing is their business model, and by getting angry, we are essentially paying them. You acknowledge he has a point. It sounds reasonable.
It does. It makes the narrator sound fair and balanced.
That makes total sense. And what about that scenery you mentioned? The constant mentions of the Kanye song in the middle of this argument.
Yeah, that's a great example. It's just clutter. It gets mentioned like 3 or 4 times.
Right. So the idea would be to use that space for something more useful.
Exactly. Instead of reminding us they're listening to Kanye, use that time to explain why ignoring them is so dangerous. The script mentions that ADL statement and the mayor of Miami. Bring that evidence in here.
So you ground the argument in real-world consequences. In Prove, this isn't just internet drama. It's about the normalization of hate speech. You cut the repetition and replace it with evidence of actual harm. It drives the story from what happened to why it matters.
Let's shift to the central idea of cancellation versus criticism. The whole point of the piece is that Brett Cooper is conflating the two.
And it's a crucial point. The script accuses her of hiding behind the idea of cancel culture to deflect any valid criticism. But, and this is a pretty big weakness, the script kind of assumes the audience already agrees with that.
It's preaching to the choir, basically. If you're already on the author's side, you just nod along. But what if you're a moderate who's genuinely worried about cancel culture?
Right. This script doesn't actually help you understand the difference. It never establishes the boundary.
It doesn't.
So the suggestion is to explicitly define the terms, probably early on, so the listener understands what's at stake. It sounds a little academic, but you need that definition of terms moment to be persuasive.
Okay, I like that. This is a chance for a really clear, punchy line. How would you phrase it?
You could insert something very direct, like, let's be clear, there's a difference between deplatforming someone, which is canceling, and calling out bad ideas in the public square, which is criticism. Brett is asking for immunity from criticism by invoking the fear of being canceled.
Oh, that's incredibly clarifying. It frames it not as Brett is dumb, but as Brett is using a rhetorical trick. It exposes the strategy.
Exactly. And honestly, all the pieces are there in the script. They're just in the wrong order. There's this quote from a user named Britta at the very end.
Oh, right. Where she says something like, anyone talking about Christians the way they do about Jews is also offensive to me.
Yeah, and the narrator just says, see? I agree. It feels completely tacked on.
A total postscript.
And it's a shame because that quote is the smoking gun. Why wait until the very end to bring in your best evidence? The suggestion is to move that Britta quote way up.
Okay.
Use it in the middle of the script to prove that the audience wants these bad ideas to be challenged. Use it as evidence that critique is a necessary part of free speech, not an attack on it.
So by moving it, you're showing it's not just the narrator's opinion, it's the community speaking up.
Exactly. It changes the entire frame from one guy's complaint to a reflection of the community's values. You preempt the defense that this is just a mob by showing it's actually a reasoned debate.
Okay, let's talk about pacing and focus. The script really leans into this reality TV angle.
It does. And conceptually, it's a good comparison because Brett Cooper herself calls it her reality TV. The weakness, though, is in how it's executed.
It gets bogged down in the details.
It gets really bogged down. It spends so much time speculating on the Scarface outfits, the gun in Sneeko's pocket, whether they coordinated their clothes in a group text.
Yeah, I found myself thinking, do I really care if they have a group chat about blazers? It feels like it drags.
It drags a lot. And more importantly, it distracts from the main point. The author's thesis is that Brett Cooper is becoming a mini Candace Owens, someone who excuses extremism for clicks.
But instead, we spend 3 minutes wondering about their fashion choices.
It just dilutes the seriousness. So we don't have to lose the humor entirely, but we need to repurpose it. The suggestion is to tighten this whole descriptive section so it serves the main argument. The description shouldn't just be look at their funny suits. It should be look at why they're wearing these suits.
Because the reality TV frame is a defense mechanism she's using.
Exactly. That's the key insight. She calls it reality TV to wash her hands of the morality of it all. If it's just a show, then they're not anti-Semites. They're just characters.
And the author is kind of falling into that same trap.
Yes, that's the meta-critique. By focusing so much on the outfits and the plot, the author is also treating it like a reality show.
Wow. So the author is doing the very thing they're accusing Brett of doing.
In a way, yeah. So you have to reframe it. Cut the fluffy rhetorical questions like, did you boys coordinate your outfit? Instead, say something like, Brett sees this as harmless reality TV entertainment because they're dressed in costume. She misses that the ideology underneath isn't a performance.
That turns the description into part of the argument. It's no longer gossip, it's analysis.
And you still get to keep the funny observation about the Scarface suits, but now it's working for your thesis. They dress like movie villains because they see politics as a movie, not as real life with real consequences.
It seems like a lot of this just comes down to trusting the audience more.
I think so. You don't need to pile on the insults or over-explain the visuals if you have a sharp, coherent argument. The narrator's voice is there, but right now it's at war with the topic.
You have to decide, are you a fan watching a show, or are you a critic analyzing a movement?
That's it. And to do that, you have to be willing to kill your darlings. The joke about the virgin has to go because it weakens your credibility. The speculation about their text has to go because it hurts the pacing.
It's about clearing out the underbrush so the main path is visible.
Perfectly put. And the core insight that Brett Cooper is drifting into dangerous territory is a really strong one. It just needs to be freed from all the clutter around it.
Okay, one last thing. The ending. It feels a bit sudden with that Britta quote.
It's very abrupt. And if we move that quote to the middle, like we discussed, the ending is left with a vacuum. It needs a new conclusion.
So what goes there instead?
A synthesis, a final, powerful statement. The narrator needs to pull all the threads together. You've established they're extremists, not just dingbats. You've proven silence is endorsement. You've defined criticism versus cancellation.
So the last line needs to be the moral imperative.
Yes, something like, if we don't criticize, they win.
A real drop the mic.
Exactly. End on the weight of the argument. Don't water it down with, anyway, see you next time. Let it sit with the listener.
All right, let's wrap this up. I think we have a really solid roadmap here for the rewrite.
We definitely do. We've covered vocabulary, structure, definitions, and focus.
So to recap, the main action item. First, elevate the vocabulary. This is the status.
Right. Swap the playground insults for precise ideological terms. Critique the hypocrisy, not the person's height.
Second, restructure that rebuttal. Isolate the Streisand effect argument. Steelman it first. Show you get it, and then dismantle it.
Third, clearly define cancellation versus criticism right up front, and use that Britta quote in the middle as your evidence.
And finally, tighten up that reality TV section. Cut the fluff. Use the visuals to prove your point about Brit mistaking dangerous ideology for harmless entertainment.
Don't fall into the reality show trap yourself.
This piece has the potential to be a really significant cultural critique. These changes could take it from just another reaction video to a definitive commentary.
Absolutely. The passion and the moral compass are there. It just needs the architectural support to make it stand strong.
We would love to see where you take this. Please send in the revised draft for another look. We're really looking forward to seeing.
Can't wait to read it.
That's it for this critique. Keep writing.